Hello, and welcome back to Contemporary American Society, Causes and Consequences of Persecution in the United States. Today we're going to discuss persecution based on membership in a social group. So what is social persecution? It's the act or practice of persecuting, especially those who are of a different origin, religion, or social outlook. So what do we mean by social outlook? Well, it refers to living in a community or a group rather than alone, and it relates to human society. The US stands out among other advanced economies as one of the most conflicted when it comes to social unity. And conflicted in sociology refers to a situation in which two or more people or groups threaten each other's purpose, each other's interests, to the extent of injuring or hurting each other. The causes of conflict in society include intolerance, injustice, and a lack of communication. In the US during the 20th century, the modern American class system started. Let's watch a video about social classes in the US. The situation hasn't changed much since this video was made in 1957.
Class. Newborn American babies, newborn citizens of these United States, free and with rights guaranteed by the Constitution. But let's take a closer look. These new arrivals in a typical American town have equal legal rights. In class, they are not equal at all. Each has a social status handed on to him by his family, ascribed to him at birth. Meet Guilford Ames III, the latest addition to one of the town's upper-class families. Guilford Ames II is the wealthiest man in town. He owns a large factory. The Ames is one of the oldest families in the community, and so it represents prestige as well as wealth. This is where an Ames family has lived for the last 100 years. And this is where Guilford Ames III will live. Like most of the babies here, this one, Theodore Eastwood by name, has an ascribed status of middle class. His father is Joseph Eastwood, high school educated and a white-collar worker in the Ames factory. He has a steady, skillful job and is comfortably off, but the chances are that he will not advance much beyond his present status. The mortgage on his house is on its way to being paid, and someday it undoubtedly will be. Although young Ted Eastwood has an ascribed status of middle class, the best status he achieves during his lifetime may be higher than the one he was born with. It could be true to maybe David Benton, whose ascribed status is lower class. David's father is Michael Benton, an unskilled factory worker who has a meager education. Mr. Benton rents the upper floor of a two-family house in a rundown section of town. The ability to rise from an ascribed status to an achieved one is called vertical mobility and is particularly characteristic of the United States. There are class lines within each general group, and these vary geographically and in relation to nationality, religion, and race. Class exists in the United States as it does everywhere, and it plays a vital part in the life of every community. Let us follow the lives of these three babies and see how class affects them. "18 years later, Gil, Ted, and Dave are in the graduating class of the town's high school. After the commencement exercises, the three good friends meet. Next fall, Gil Ames is going to attend an Ivy League university. Ted, who took a commercial course in high school, plans to get a white-collar job like his father's. Dave is going to work too, so that he can add to his family's income. Friends forever, they've said. Well, maybe in a way. But these boys come from families of different classes, and the lines of social class are real here in America, as they are everywhere, in Europe, in Asia, and even in the Soviet Union. As the years pass, class boundaries will separate Gil and Ted and Dave more and more. The boundaries between Ted's middle-class parents are as important as those that lie between the upper and middle classes. Graduation from high school has a different significance for the boys and their families. For Gil, it is only a milestone in his formal education. Later that night, Mr. Ames has a serious talk with his son. Mr. Ames tells Gil that he sent him to public high school so that he could gain a democratic background. But now he's about to enter an environment more in keeping with his social position. At college, he will meet men of his own kind. Gil understands, because already he has developed an awareness of his class, its patterns, and its rules. In another part of town, the Eastwoods have just finished dinner, and Mr. Eastwood is talking with Ted about his plans for the future. Ted's record in high school was generally good, but there was one subject in which he excelled: drawing. Ted would like to do something professionally in the art field, but his father discourages him. In the light of Mr. Eastwood's own experience, security lies in business and white-collar work. Ted sees his father's point of view and agrees that the commercial courses he took in high school have prepared him for office work. And so, that's the kind of household. Graduation from high school is an event worthy of celebration, and a family party in Dave's honor is in progress. Mr. Benton proudly announces to the guests that Dave has already gone out and found himself a job. In the Benton family and among their neighbors, economic pressures are important. Dave's initiative in finding work is highly regarded by all of them, and his parents are justifiably proud. Four years later, Dave, 22 now, has a job at a local gas station. Although he's still only a gas station attendant, he's studying to be an automobile mechanic. The driver of the car is his old friend of high school days, Gil Ames. Gil has graduated from college now and is on his way to start work in his father's factory. Dave is going to be married just as soon as his job of auto mechanic comes through. Gil's first day of work in his father's factory turned up still another familiar face. Ted Eastwood has a job in the bookkeeping department. Mr. Ames is taking his son on a tour of all the departments of the factory. Someday, Gil will take over the business, and today, he's beginning to learn about it. Kind of rocked you, didn't it? Gil Ames with his future all laid out for him. But you're Ted Eastwood, stuck in a job you'll be in all your life. Why don't you get out? What's keeping you here anyway? Mary Blakesley? You thought you'd marry her. But remember what she said that day in the car? Her car, of course.
But can't you see it's impossible, Ted? It's not just money. We live in different worlds.
Sure, different worlds inside this town, but there are other worlds, bigger towns. You've got some money saved, go to New York. Give it a try for 6 months. And if you fail, only you're not going to fail. And Ted didn't fail. He had talent and the ability to work hard. He started with a job in the art department of a large advertising agency. They called him a production assistant, but actually, he was a sort of a glorified errand boy. But at least he was through with bookkeeping and close to the kind of work he liked. At night, he took courses in commercial art and advertising and spent a good deal of his free time working and studying at home. In the years that followed, Ted gained a thorough technical knowledge of his field. By the time he was 30 years old, he was the head of the art department of an advertising agency. Horizontal mobility, moving from one place to another, has resulted in vertical mobility for Ted Eastwood, a movement upward from his ascribed status to an achieved status that is largely the result of his professional standing. Class lines are drawn differently in a large city like New York, although they are still there. Here, professional standing, power, and wealth are of great importance. It is possible for members of socially prominent families, theater people who may have come from the lower class, and successful businessmen of the middle class to mix socially, and Ted is an accepted member of the group. But when Ted returns to his hometown, on a vacation. How does he fare? Has he a new achieved status back there too? When he meets the girl he wanted to marry, have things changed? The town is small enough so that Mary has heard about Ted's success in New York. But this isn't New York. Mary is married to Gil now, and although they are friendly enough toward Ted, he still isn't part of their world, and he never will be. In this town, the ascribed status of his parents is still the class to which he belongs. Ted's mother brings him up to date on all the town gossip, but he only half hears her. The meeting with Mary has stirred old memories in him. He's remembering what she said to him about different worlds. He knows now that to her and Gil, he's still the nice kid from the wrong side of the railroad tracks, no matter how successful he is. His achieved status is higher than that of his father's because he has a profession, but that status depends on a place. In this case, New York. Dave Benton, on the other hand, has changed his status hardly at all. He's now a skilled auto mechanic. And although his achieved status is not much better than the one ascribed to him by his family, financially, he will be able to provide better for his wife and children. His third child, a son, was born in the local hospital just yesterday. This new Benton baby has the ascribed status given him by his family. He may, as he grows up, reach a higher achieved status as Ted Eastwood did. Or he may, as his own father did, stay in the class to which he was born. His vertical mobility will depend greatly upon him, his character, his talents, and abilities. It will possibly depend, too, upon geographical mobility, because the criteria for class boundaries vary from place to place. And so it will be for all these babies, all citizens, all equal before the law, but not the same by standards of class.
After World War II, factory production in the US and laws that protected the rights of workers let workers get good paying jobs. This led to a quick expansion of the middle class, and it let many white workers in the lower class get out of poverty and into a stable life. There are three social classes in the US, mostly because of socioeconomic conditions: the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class. In the upper class, there are people who have a lot of money, some of them money from previous generations, that is, they inherited the money, and some of them because they earned the money themselves. The middle class got bigger in the 1950s and 1960s when there were more opportunities for white Americans to make money and to live outside the cities in the suburbs. These people bought houses and cars in the suburbs and gave their money to their children. The members of the working class, that is the lower class, has people who didn't have the opportunity to buy a house or a car, and they stayed in the cities. The cities had less money than the suburbs, In the suburbs, schools received a lot of money. In the past, African Americans and Jewish people couldn't get loans to buy a house in the suburbs. This kept people in houses with little value and made it difficult for them to move up to the next level. Barriers, obstacles like this have made it more difficult for people in the lower class to rise above poverty, above being poor. The US economy has changed because of technology. This means that people in the upper class have become more wealthy, and those in the lower class have to get over many years of barriers, obstacles from the 20th century. By the end of the 20th century, the middle class was getting smaller and the upper and lower classes were getting larger. This is still the way the social classes are in the US today. The distribution of wealth in the US has become more unequal. Conflict theory in sociology describes societies changing and developing due to the conflict between social classes. In the US, social class refers to groups of Americans based on their wealth, their income, their education, and their occupation. That is the kind of work they do. Americans see strong conflicts in society between people who support different political parties, people with different ethnic or racial backgrounds, people who practice different religions, and people who live in cities and people who live in rural areas. Americans say that discrimination against people based on their race or their ethnicity is a serious problem in their society. When it comes to important issues facing society in general, people may disagree over policies, but in the US, most people disagree on the basic facts. In the US, there are large political divisions on most of the measures of conflict in society.